No, it would have been 3 years ago. We started having coffee together, and then when COVID started up, like getting close to 2 years ago now, a year and a half for sure. That's when we started doing this stuff on Skype, on Zoom. We always joked about it before that we should do it over the internet, and then then we got forced into doing it. Kind of funny, but so it's been about 3 years now we've been doing this, really, getting together once a week.
Well, it's taken a life of its own, and I'm sort of leaning now to trying to line up different people to speak. But Tim, you actually, and I'm recording this now, you coined the phrase "no dead sharks." And I'm just curious, wondering if you could explain how you thought of that and what you did to inspire it. I've got to take a call here, so go ahead, Tim, for the listener.
Yeah, I see Dom has joined us too. Good morning, Dom. Are you driving or sitting?
Morning, guys. Yeah, just driving in. As I say, I'll be able to get to school in about 15 minutes, but just listen in for now.
Yeah, no problem. And I honestly, I'm not, I guess a simple, how I sort of came to the Sharks kind of moniker, like after having our discussions for any number of mornings over at Cadence, we had talked a lot about sort of lifelong learning and always looking for something new, something different, stay in touch with the game, and always moving forward. And it just reminded me of the scene in the old Woody Allen movie Annie Hall, where they're sitting on a plane. And I know you two guys, I think have heard this before, but they're sitting on a plane in the movie, and they're lamenting the pending failure of their relationship. And Woody Allen sort of muses about sharks, when they swim through the water, they always have to keep moving forward in order to survive. The water goes through their gills and they extract oxygen from it, so they literally have to move forward to survive. And he looks at Annie Hall and he says, well, unfortunately, I think what we've got on our hands here in terms of their relationship is a dead shark. So we are now sort of, and Morris Lukowicz always lamented the fact that it was a negative moniker, no dead shark. So we've kind of morphed into just being simply the Sharks group, even though our mugs still say no dead sharks.
I like the no dead sharks because it says you have to keep on swimming.
Yeah, keep on swimming.
I just filled my cup.
Yeah, likewise. And Dom, do you have one? Oh,
I do. I couldn't.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if I sent you one or not, but I've got a few more I've got to send out, but it's sort of an ongoing project. But hey, Wally, I got to share you a story. Like I just got an email yesterday from one of Barb's oldest friends from high school, actually an old boyfriend of hers. He's one of our very good friends now. He lives in Ottawa, and he's a math teacher by trade, and he's actually retired now, but doing his master's, or semi-retired, and he's doing his master's in Ottawa. And he told me a story that I wasn't. Hi, morning, Sammie. He told me a story I wasn't aware of, and I don't know if you guys are aware, but Ottawa has really struggled this year after a pretty good start, their first 5-6 games. And they were on a big, long losing streak, I think 7 or 8 games. And apparently their coaches held a team meeting with video, but the coaches didn't say a word. It was all, hey, what do you guys think about this? And let the players talk. And it was a player-directed meeting, and they immediately went out and won 3 in a row. And so he had emailed me, and he just, because we go back and forth once in a while about the the parallels, and it's too bad Jordan's not on, but the parallels, Tom's a teacher as well, and you are, Wally, but the parallels between coaching and teaching, obviously, there are many, even though they're not quite the same, but there are many parallels. Anyway, so we had a bit of a back and forth on, he was asking my take on that situation with Ottawa and how he is learning to apply the same principle in his math class, like directing less, questioning more, and letting his students sort of direct the conversation. And he's found it quite rewarding both for himself and for his students. So just kind of an interesting sidebar.
Have you been watching the Ottawa games, and did you watch Poundy do the color commentating?
No, I didn't. I know she's on there occasionally. I've seen her once or twice, but yeah.
She did her first time on Tuesday night. She did color. So she's been on the panel. Yeah. But she actually did color. So I'm nice. Curious how she did.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it probably went well. I wonder if my PVR might have picked it up, but she's used to doing that with Rod for all the female games. So I'm sure she maybe felt a bit nervous, but pretty comfortable in knowing how it works and everything. So yeah, I'm gonna have to look and see if I got it.
Definitely check it out. The one thing I think she does in the women's game, her and Rod together do too much of background story.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because I thought what you were going to say is they tend to at times sort of talk over the play instead of letting and you know what, I go back to my my days in Atlanta, 2001 to 2003, and I sort of learned that that's a coached broadcasting technique to basically let the play run itself and describe itself. Because my experience in Atlanta was this, as an assistant coach there, I was watching the video of one of our games that Gary Bettman happened to be in the broadcast booth as they were doing the play-by-play.
Yeah.
And we were struggling to create a fan base in Atlanta, and it was one of the most exciting games of the year. One of the games we played the best. I forget who we were playing, but it was a tremendous game, back and forth. And here were our broadcasters sitting with Gary Bettman, shooting the breeze and talking about this, talking about that, as this tremendous game was going back and forth and forth. And none of that excitement was captured in the broadcast. So I talked to Matt and Billy Jaffe, who's on, you often see him on the Bruins games. He does Bruins games now with Barry Peterson. But they were the two broadcasters. They said, "Hey, do you guys realize what happened last night?" It's just my impression. And Matt, tremendous guy, he said, we're sort of coached to do that. It's like a baseball technique where, because there's so much dead time in baseball, they spend a lot of their time telling stories and doing background stuff and everything because there's so much dead time. But I said, okay, that's great for baseball, but it's, in my view, it's not very good for hockey. So anyway, I
agree. And I think that part of the issue was that in women's hockey, they kind of had to do that at the beginning to kind of bring people in. Like, here are the players. This is where they're from. This is what their background. And I think they still, I love Rod, but I think that he kind of still had that mentality. So I think Cheryl's getting out of it with with Kenzie as the new play-by-play a little bit. But I think working at the NHL with the Ottawa game, I think, they're pro there. So I think they'll just be able to nudge her and say, your turn to talk, like in the neutral zone. And then they'll go back to the play. So I'm just excited for her learning opportunity to be in such a fast-paced environment, because I think in the women's hockey, and now having worked in a bunch of the games for TSN, it is not their priority. There is one production person that we have with us. So like in the studio I was in with Tessa, and there's one TV, like there's 4 TVs, but there's one person sitting in the office or in there with you, and then one person back there, as opposed to NHL broadcast that has 10 there in studio and then 10 in the production office. And so anyways, I feel like you can get away with a lot in the women's game because nobody's really saying much to you.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for her. So you'll have to listen to it and tell me how she did. If she was like quicker with her, like her pacing and everything. And I mean, she knows the game so well, that's not an issue.
Yeah. And I agree with you. Like, I think she and Rod do a tremendous job, and have for a long time with the women's game. And they're all, Rod in particular, being a guy, Poundy, of course, is going to be supportive of the female game, but Rod's a tremendous fan and he does a really, really good job. And I also agree that, there may have been a bit more of a need for the background stuff. And I love the background stuff. It's one of the things I love about CBC and Hockey Day in Canada, all the background stuff.
Right.
It's almost more interesting and better than the game sometimes, but not during the play, generally speaking.
Yeah, exactly.
Please let us watch the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Wally and I are going to the women's game tonight, Sammie. I think they played PWHPA.
You'll have to tell me how that's. Can you guys take notes for me? Because I am doing the rivalry series next week and then doing the PWHPA game that is on Sportsnet also next week.
Okay, but it'll be a different team though, I think, right? They're different, so take notes on the
Canadian. Right, but you guys will see the top players for the PW. They'll be the ones that we'll be focusing on anyways on Sportsnet. So I didn't look to see who the roster was, but I'm assuming that they would have like Brittany Howard. I think Jesse Aldridge is playing, the one that just got cut. Players like that. Like, I'm just curious how close it is. Like, if it'll be similar to Wally when we had the podium series.
Yeah.
Or if it will be more of a blowout. I don't know what to expect.
Yeah, I know it. And emailing with Lester this week, I just wanted to make sure that we could actually watch the game, get in spectators and,
from my perspective, all I'm really looking for is kind of storylines, like what, who on the PW player of them do you guys think is really strong that, could have maybe been in the national team program? The ones that are kind of overlooked, those kind of storylines, I think are really intriguing to viewers.
And do you know, will it be the same team that plays tonight that you're going to do next week or no?
No. So what I'm doing next week is a 4-team tournament here in Toronto. So it's Calgary, Montreal, Minnesota, Toronto, and then they're playing off to play in the final. So we're just doing the final.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So some of those players will be playing, some of them won't, but we won't know until that day.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll take some notes for sure.
Yeah, just to kind of give some storylines. And I'm curious too for Canada what their lineups are, if they are similar to what they have been against the US, or they're going to be trying some new lineup combinations. And I'm just really hoping that Kristen Campbell gets a game. I mean, she just has been overlooked this entire time. I just hope that she gets to play a game against the US eventually.
I'm surprised actually, like I was asking Lester because on the website, I think they've only got one game left against the Tier 2 guys. It's at January 10th. Yeah. And I'm surprised they don't have a couple more. I presume, like in the past, they're likely going to do their final, I think, 3 cuts they've got to make. They'll probably do it before Christmas. So I'm surprised they don't have 1 or 2 more games before Christmas even. But it looks
like the COC has a media press release coming out on the 20th of December for the national team girls. So it's got to be done before then. I'm assuming after these 2 US games. But I'm assuming probably like Billy's team leading up to the Olympics, there's way more COVID protocols that you can't get more games in. So I think Billy's team is going to South Korea for the 2 weeks leading up to get over there and get acclimatized. I'm assuming the girls will do the same. You can't really play pre-game series over there, though. That's what's tough. And then I think you have to quarantine for 2 weeks prior to entering the village. I think there's some things around that. So I think that it's just going to be harder for them to get any more games in.
Yeah. I haven't actually heard myself. about our quarantine procedure before.
Yeah, what it is. I know in Vancouver, they did those like secret games in Vancouver where they played the boys teams. I wonder if they could do that wherever they end up for their pre-training camp, if they could do that.
Pretty strict. Like I know before Worlds, like the IHF, they would not allow, like the girls had to bubble for I think a week before they came to Calgary for the World Championship, and they were not allowed to bring in like a boys team to play or anybody else. They were in the bubble. They had to stay in the bubble. Nobody else could come into the bubble. So I wouldn't be surprised if something.
So do you guys have to quarantine? Like, does your team have to quarantine prior, or are you guys going anywhere prior?
That's what I meant. I haven't heard officially what the procedure is going to be. I was just reading through last week on the Olympic website. Like there's a big, huge, monstrous document. But I was specifically looking through because we had one or two players that had chosen to this point not to be vaccinated, and if anybody that's not vaccinated has to go to Beijing and quarantine for 3 weeks before the games start. And so our two players, I think, or players that we had that weren't vaccinated, chose to get vaccinated, thankfully, because that probably would have removed them really from our roster in all likelihood.
Right. Interesting how that's whatever pushes people, I guess, over the threshold.
Yeah. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see. I would imagine there'll be at least sort of a week-long quarantine mandate before you get to Beijing, or longer, maybe 10 days, and then a couple of days when you're there, so they can test when you arrive, and maybe 2 or 3 days do another negative test. I would imagine something like that's gonna be the procedure, but I don't know just yet.
It's crazy to me that you guys still, I mean, this is the way of the world for the last 2 years, but that you don't know. You think back when we centralized, you guys knew every moment of every day for the 8 months leading up to the Olympics. And the fact that now here we are 2 months out, well, less than 2 months out, right?
Yeah.
And it's still kind of all up in the air. It must be hard as a coach to go through all of that.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly has been the case at the World Championships the last couple of years. Like 3 weeks before the championship here in Calgary, we didn't even have a practice schedule. Like we didn't know when we were practicing, how much we were practicing, and the procedure may in fact already be in place. I'm just not aware of it. It may be in that document, and but the federation hasn't communicated it directly to us as yet.
Right, and you've only read page 84 so far, or whatever.
That's exactly right. I was just going to give Wally the heads up that Jordan's joined us. Hey, Jordan, I hear you passed your HP1 first phase anyway with flying colors.
Well, the first phase, you know how it works, Tim, with your teacher, is you always make sure that there's one or two things in it that they've taught you right off the bat. So we started off with a warm-up drill that was an FIO drill that Wally had shared with me a long time ago. So I knew I was going to be off to the right start then. So
a little graph never hurt either. Wally loves sushi, so a little sushi gift certificate probably will go a long way to passing your HP1.
Jordan, what are the tasks you have to do right now? Jordan?
Oh, are you muted, Jordan?
Yeah, no.
Oh, no.
No,
I've got to ask your task you're having to do right now. Tasks, period, or plural.
Oh, the tasks for the HP1 right now is basically a practice plan or two, and going through those, executing the practice, and then following that is a game plan and being observed while on the bench with that, and well, the whole game plan right through the dressing room piece and pre-icing and between each periods, as well as the conclusion of a game too. So it's fairly all-encompassing that way, but I've been fortunate enough to have been taking this master's course in coaching over the past year and a half of COVID, of Thursday morning Sharks calls, that I was pretty confident in what I've been doing this year, and excited about putting it to the test, putting theory to practice. So it's been.
I was curious
really
because I'm doing the goaltender certification right now, and so we're on task 5, I think, of 16. But right now we're doing this stuff on the Hockey Canada app. So creating practice plans on there, and so we have goaltending practice plans you have to create, and how to teach coaches how to teach goalies, but also the one is shooting drills for scoring on goalies, but navigating the Hockey Canada app. So I'm curious, Jordan, how you're doing navigating the app.
We aren't using the app.
No,
we use the Coach Them is the drill draw platform that we use. Oop. That's okay. Coach Them is the drill draw platform that we use with our association, and then it's I post all of my practice plans to Team Snap for the players.
But through the Hockey Canada HP1, you guys didn't have to navigate the Hockey Canada drill app?
No, the HP1, I started that prior to COVID, and it was a week-long seminar at Red Deer with Hockey Alberta, and so I did all of the written portion previously, and this is just the field test.
Gotcha.
Sammie, I'm just going to interject for a minute, and Jordan as well. What he talked about was his my formal role evaluation related to practice and a game, and because he's been on the Sharks for so long, it's a no-brainer. He's ahead of the game. Like the Hockey Canada app doesn't keep up with us relative to developmental tactics and strategies. And Jordan, and I talked about this earlier, Jordan, when Mike Benelli was on, that you daring to try Daryl's stuff on the ice and sharing his video of what he did and running the same drills at practice was, from an HP1 evaluator's point of view, a high-risk thing to do, but they got it. So I see the merits of this forward thinking going on, and because we're talking every week about what's going on today, we can keep up at least with the game. And Jordan, the assignment, I believe you had an assignment when you took your 7-day course and you had to complete a long exam and submit it. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah, I submitted that. It was right after COVID, basically. And yeah, it was one of those things that I think that you get out of it what you put in. So I put a considerable amount of time into that because I knew that it was something that it didn't matter what team I would have in the future, that it would be that foundational piece in helping me think through a season plan and all of those all-encompassing pieces that way.
Jordan, I did my HP1 also, and you're right. You get out what you put in, and I was not coaching any teams, nor have I. So I figured that I would just go and do it for real when I was back coaching at that level, because I felt like you're right. I took the weekend. It was great. I mean, it was, they encouraged the girls to do it while you're within the Hockey Canada program. But without having an evaluator being able to come and assess you on the bench and help you through things. And I just felt like I was not really at the right place to be able to do it all and be able to successfully learn what I needed to learn in that environment. So I loved the week for sure. And I loved some of the written stuff, but I feel like that's where you really get out of it, is having the evaluators there with you, giving you that feedback.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the other thing, obviously, it's been fortunate for me to having Wally as the evaluator, because I know that I'm in a safe place to take risks, and so that's been a good piece too. Go ahead, Wally.
He's a hard marker, Jordan. Be careful.
When you sort of expressed concern that we hadn't used the Hockey Canada app, I've been exposed to it very early and went through it. And for me, it deals with very advanced, high-level kids at all ages. It doesn't deal with the teaching and the progressions and regressions necessary to be able to teach to get to that point. So I haven't really delved into that. And during Jordan's ice time, he had his assistant coaches between drills do so about 3 minutes of specific skill work. One was stop and tee start. The other one was cross and drop passing, and then forward and backward skating, passing and touch passing on forehand and backhand sides. Really, really good stuff. And I was able to intervene with the assistant coach on the side and share some teaching points about the stop and tee start, because they didn't turn their heads to allow the momentum to shift the center of gravity to make a tee start possible. And when I evaluate, I am evaluating the receptivity to these kinds of ideas. And the staff was entirely open-minded to accepting it. And I know I talked to Jordan as he was doing his one-on-one race drill. The defense, excellent striders, but they couldn't use their arms. So Jordan, can you relate that story a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, sure, Wally. So the D, we started early this year with the importance of striding, and of course there's that one-on-one race where basically the D are starting as low as you possibly can get them down to the goal line. Right now they're at just below the dot, and the forwards are starting on the goal line, and it's just a one-on-one race where the forwards have to stay along the boards, can't cut to the middle till the far blue, and the D have to stride backwards. We allow them one crossover in their start, but then it's straight striding to the far blue line before they can angle or commit to contact with the forward. And so it's been an interesting go with it. The kids are uncomfortable with it to begin with, but they bought in early and said, can we do that more often, because they wanted to be better striders. But what Wally's observation was, and was one that I kind of felt that I should have picked up on, but I guess I've been too concentrated on their footwork. And he was talking about how a lot of them had their upper body was neutral, that it wasn't working in concert with their lower body and the push-pull. And so when he brought that to my attention, I watched a couple more kids go, and I'm like, yeah, you're 100% correct. So brought the kids in, gave them that feedback, told them that we would challenge them to do that for 2 more goes each, and call it the end of the drill, because they were kind of getting tired, because they get wore out in that there's far fewer D than forwards. So did a couple more, and the observation from a couple of the players were, one girl, she immediately said, I'm faster this way, and she goes, it doesn't feel as tight in my chest as she was skating. So it was a good it was a really good experience that way, and the kids were seeing, well, I shouldn't say all of them, but there were quite a few of them that saw immediate result from it too.
Well, I know Tim has a question, but I have a comment on that after. So go ahead,
Yeah,
Tim.
I think Wally had his hand up first. So go ahead, Wally.
Well, I that my hand was up from before, but I did want to mention, and I'm going to remind you, Jordan, when you're talking about tasks, when I'm doing Jordan, he's helping the program, because what he's doing on the ice and his ability to experiment and what he's learned, he's applying. So my prediction was that practice wasn't going to work. It worked unbelievably well. So the forward thinking that to take and do Darryl Belfry's stuff with a group of girls the first time and put in drills that I barely could understand, let alone execute, was a tribute to his ability to read his audience, which is a female coached group, extremely intelligent, and they just picked up on it like you wouldn't believe. So I've given Jordan a couple of tasks he may have forgot about. You know, the passing is not a problem, but I've asked him to do, I'm going to ask him to do a couple of assignments. One of them was just over the phone, he shared a conversation with a girl and dealing with her journal. And I've asked him to do a one-page summary of that. And Jordan, for the listeners, could you share that story? And then we'll go to Tim Bothwell's question. But this is the idea of high performance evaluation is learning. And so
before you do that, Jordan, I just had a really quick, when you mentioned that the D got tired because there are a lot more forwards than D, really good opportunity to use some of your forwards to learn the same skill, because on occasion in the game, they're going to be caught in that situation where they got to defend one-on-one, especially if you use a forward as a D on a power play or something. But I just wanted to interject that. So go ahead and share your story on your conversation with your player.
Actually, Tim, it's funny that you mentioned that. The previous practice when we did that one-on-one race, the D came to me and said, can the forwards go on the D side and we go on the forward side once? And I said, sure, why? And they said, well, because some of them are chirping us a little bit because they weren't cheating on the drill, and so they are striding, and some of their faster forwards, of course, are beating them to that far blue line. And so so it was kind of funny that they did it. We did that, and then the forwards had a little more respect for the D on that drill and how hard it is for them to straight stride the whole length. But
good for both of them. Good for both of them to see the other side, quote unquote, as well. Like for the D to feel what it's like for a forward in that situation, and vice versa. So yeah, it's really, really good.
Well,
but
the
anyway,
the other thing that what Wally was talking about with the Darryl Belfry drills, what they were is ones where Darryl was designing to do with taking a surf angle or more of a forward angle on defending to terminate zone exits and zone entries. And that's one that actually will translate to all players. And it's interesting. It's an interesting way of thinking about it. When we think about a D traditionally in the offensive zone pinching up on that anchored forward down at the hash marks, we think of the D skating up to them forwards, stopping against them, or pivoting backwards skating. Whereas what Darryl's encouraging is taking that surf angle coming at them, and you're meeting them pointing the same direction. So even if the puck squirts by, you're in a foot race skating forwards. for both players. And so it is an interesting thing. And our players, yeah, we hadn't done that before. And I sent them the video that we had video link to look at it, but not many had, and tried drawing it out a bit as best I could. And of course, you know, that translates for one or two. And then the next thing that we did was we did demo it on the ice with my assistant coaches so they could see it. And it did translate that the girls, they started to think it and get it, and actually they applied it really well, and it's something we're going to be using quite a bit in the future here, just so that they get that feel for it. Because even as Daryl had said in his video, that the first couple times that the player is doing it, they're not very comfortable with taking that angle. They still want to transition to the backward skating and gap up and defend that way. So we're working on it, and it's something that I do see that if we can get it into our repertoire, it'll just be another one of those things that'll help us be able to defend better, as well as I'm thinking at our level that on the forecheck side of things in the O zone, that terminating those zone exits against some teams that aren't nearly as strong at carrying the puck out or that sort of piece, that it will be hard to defend, or we will be hard to handle on the forecheck that way. So but long story longer, the other story that Wally was talking about was in doing one-on-ones with players. Have a player that I think I shared this one before with some of you, but it was a player that as we're doing our one-on-ones, we start out with talking about core values, the core values that the team has, and asking the player which core values they feel that they have that supports the team, and then lead into well, actually I back up one step. I start with if they've been working on what they want to do after high school, and because some have a clear path of what they want to do, and others not necessarily, but it's just asking that question so that they can continue to focus on that piece, then talk about the core values. Then we get into the talking about what they've personally been working on to improve, and then the last one is what we can do to support them, and what they may need from us to support them in their development as a coaching staff. And that's basically how it went. But I learned a while ago that it was actually from Jungle Jim Hunter, the value of journaling as an elite level athlete and the importance of it. And so we set up, provide the girls with journals right from the start of the season, and do team building activities where we have prompts, giving them to think about different things, and they journal in them. But their journals are theirs, and I tell them that right from the start, that it's a safe place for them to jot down their thoughts, because I will never ask to read them or look at them or those pieces. And so when we were having these one-on-ones, this one player brought her journal along and asked if there was anything that if I wanted to see her journal at the end of our one-on-one. And I said, no, your journal is yours. But I said, is there anything that you've got in there that you would choose to share? And she started thumbing through it, and there was quite a few pages in succession that were just little jot notes on them. And I just said, hey, Soph, what's that? And she said, well, you gave us the prompt of going through how we feel after every time that we're on the ice, and how we feel strength-wise, mentally, and how we've fatigue and hydration and hunger and all of those things. And she said, I've been using it. And so I said, so what have you learned by it, Soph? And she goes, well, she goes, I learned that our earlier practices that I'm lots of times feeling hungry, so I need to eat more during the day leading into those, and just managing some of those things, and some of the times when we're really busy, that I become more tired and that I need more rest, and so it was kind of interesting to see how this player was learning more about herself as not just an elite athlete, but as a person, and what she needed to do to take care of herself. And I thought that was a great insight by that.
Jordan, just a reminder, if you could put that in a one pager so I can share it with Hockey Canada, ideally to, for them to share it with other evaluators, just an indication of the level of thinking that's going on out there and application by coaches. And coaches who coach the game are living the game on a day-to-day basis and learning something every day. And people creating programs who aren't coaching don't have that luxury of being able to experiment like you are. So you've got that one assignment. There was one other I can't think of. Maybe you can remind me of it later. But Sammie, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to comment, Jordan. I think that's awesome. Wally, you made a comment about the Hockey Canada app. By no means am I a proponent of it necessarily. It is not necessarily the easiest thing to navigate, and you're right, there isn't progression. So I think like in the HP1 are utilizing the coaches that are going through the program to fill in the gaps a lot. So we also have paper things where we have to progress. Say, for instance, we have to do a 10 drill teaching sequence for teaching traffic and net for a goalie, of how to start from the very basic to, whereas on the app, there's simply one drill of traffic in front of the net. So I really feel like they are utilizing our expertise to kind of fill in those gaps. They also have had us evaluate the goalies for other national teams, which I can see there's not very many that are doing women's hockey, but there would be, now 30 goaltending coaches evaluating the Finnish 3 goaltenders. So that's providing them with a lot of knowledge, as they go into these world championships and U18 level. And anyway, so I think that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to comment on Jordan's drill that you're talking about, the D versus the forwards. I was on the ice with our U6s, very similar, but the coaches are Jennifer Bothwell and Adrian Lamonaco. Now, obviously married. Adrian is an incredible teacher of the game, probably one of the best I've ever seen, similar to Thomas Piccina, I would say, sort of at that level. And obviously Jennifer, one of the best skaters in the entire world. So they're now teaching new kids how to skate. And I've watched Jennifer teach for so long. She's so great at it. But the very basic of where your arms are going, Jennifer teaches like a speed skater. They're going sort of forwards and back. And then Adrian is teaching crossbody. And you could see them both kind of having this conversation together, trying to figure it out. And it's just really fascinating to see 2 elite level coaches at the highest level learning and growing on the ice together as they are teaching U5s and really or U6s and really having to break it down. So it was really fascinating to be kind of a part of that conversation. I mean, I wasn't a part listening on their conversation, I guess. So yeah, I mean, I guess there's so many different ways to teach just even the very basic of skills, and to see both of them kind of try the other one and try to figure it out. And yeah, I found that really great.
Sammie, I just want to mention on that point, to me, the forward striding is a different arm action. And I know the speed skaters completely go across the body, benefiting from a long stride with their arms. And I've always advocated the southwest arm action with forward skaters and north-south push-pull action with backward skaters. And it's paid off for me. And I've concluded that a hockey skater would not cross the front of his body in terms of the degree of rotation of his arm. But
that was similar to Jen's. I think Jen probably learned from you. Whenever I've been on the ice with you, you teach the same way as Jen. That like I don't know if I can do it on the camera, but you're really throwing your arms out, right? Like you're throwing your arms out this way, like a sprinter, right?
Yeah.
With maybe a little cross, but not much. Whereas Adrian's was more, you know.
Yeah.
She may have picked that up from Mark Power, Sammie, because that was one of his things too. Is mainly north south, but just a little crossover, not much past the midline, which seems to make sense in terms of the physics of it. I mean, this motion, like you're not trying to go sideways, like a little bit more of a north south motion would, to me, logically be a better way to.
Yeah, I mean, both are phenomenal skaters, you know. So it was just a interesting. So that was just a tidbit I wanted to add to the whole conversation, but.
And you know, I'm really glad when Jordan came on, I was able to refer to backward striding, and I mean, when you've coached such a long time and taught skating such a long time, it just slapped me in the face right away. And it's such a fundamental thing. Forward and backward action of the arms is different than the sideways action of forward striding. And coaches don't really understand that. And they're not taught that in our coaching development programs. Back in our day, we were taught about the biomechanics of skating and, using all the joints and using all the joints in order, but also the stable balance principle, where your arms move to the side in coordination with your legs thrust. And that affects your balance. You want to push onto the striding leg in an efficient fashion. So that teaching element has gone out of coaching.
I don't, Jordan, during your HP1, did you guys have biomechanics? Because we certainly did at the goaltending certification. And it was Vicky Bendis, actually, who was doing a lot of the biomechanics teaching, which I found really amazing. I don't know if you guys have coached Vicky, but she really broke it down and was teaching the science of it all. And a lot of it had to do with injury prevention on the goaltending side. So I'm curious if Jordan had that at his HP1.
Well, it would have fit into exactly what you're talking about, the injury prevention part of it, and that was more about developing a physical plan. We didn't talk about it as much on the ice, and I think that to do with on ice, and I think that, and I'm going to say I don't think it's the arrogance, but I think it was the idea that if you're dealing with an elite level team, that you are not teaching at the basic levels, and I know that Wally would obviously see the error in that, and one of the things that probably one of the more important things that I learned from Wally way back when was the importance of regression. And I think that we get so excited about progression all the time and trying to advance the kids that we forget sometimes that we need to circle back. And that's it's not a knock on your ability to teach if you regress something. I've found it's a knock on your ability to teach if you refuse to regress. And you have to be able to take it back every once in a while. And I was full well ready to regress what I was doing with Daryl's drills, but it was one of those things that actually we did it in a way that the girls caught on, and I'm maybe a little biased, but I think I've got a great group of kids that are pretty receptive, pretty smart. So I've been fortunate that way. And I'm looking really forward to them getting to learn from Sammie Joe Small on Monday. And it's one of those things that they should have their journals with them, Sammie, on that date, because I still laugh at when Jungle Jim Hunter was speaking to my hockey program at Chestermere High way back when, and one of the kids he was a pretty elite player, walks in and just sits down, and Jim said to him, he goes, "Where's your paper? Or where's your books?" And the kid goes, "Well, I don't have any homework, and I don't think there'll be any homework from this. and Jim said to him, well, what if I say something that's important enough that you should write it down? He goes, so you don't forget it. And the kid gave him a blank stare. So Jim went over to the side. He saw at the side of the room that there was paper, and on the teacher's desk there was pencils. He took the kid, gave him a piece of paper and a pencil. And then he went in to tell the story about how his mom had taught him to journal, and how he felt that was probably the number one contributing factor to his development, that he was able to reflect on things and see how he was getting better.
Sammie, do you remember when Jungle Jim spoke to the group in 2005, 2006? It was pretty interesting. I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was really great. I've done some stuff with him since then and presented at various different conferences with him. So yeah, he has a very motivational outlook. He, if I remember correctly, he gave us like a chain link too, right? Is that him?
He quite illegally defamed the loonies. If you remember, I still have it.
Oh yeah, and he put it through the loonie.
Yeah.
That's right.
I still have it. He punched a hole in a bunch of loonies and gave them to us, and I have it on a carabiner clipped to my closing ceremonies jacket. Actually, still.
Yeah, it came on the carabiner.
Yeah,
the carabiner was part of it. Yes, I still have that somewhere. I should look for that.
Yeah. The old days.
I think if they want to bring their journals, then you've taught them well. But if they don't and they prefer to just listen and it'll be participating. So there'll be no skill testing questions at the end.
And it is interesting that more than a few players have eliminated themselves from the Hockey Canada group by refusing to journal or doing a inadequate job of journaling or logging. And it's a really good skill to develop for sure.
I learned it early on in track and field, because in track and field you have to do it. You don't have a choice. But looking back now, I feel like it certainly helped me. But now knowing a lot of different people's learning styles and what they're good at, and I think it's not for everybody. And I can appreciate that now. And that for some people, it is just an extra headache at the end of the night. That within the Hockey Canada program, I would say, Tim, when we were going through it, I bet you 50% of the athletes were untruthful and not real about any of the logging and journaling.
Yeah, that's to their detriment.
Exactly, but they were just doing it. There would be logbook parties where people would just copy other logbooks, and I agree. But it's, to me, there's something, maybe a conversation with some people would be easier than having to write it all down. Writing is not everybody's skill, so I think the process of debriefing is so key, and like acknowledging, and but I'm a huge proponent of it, but I do get that some people, it's maybe not their thing.
Well, I surely agree that people have different learning styles. That's well established, and B, that some people are, for lack of a better way of saying it, lazier than other people. It's a skill that needs to be developed, and I don't think there's much question that it would be a benefit to people over time. But yes, it's like anything. It's attention to detail can be helpful in a reflective way. Absolutely. I think you're next, Wally. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mike joined us. Jordan Fenton has come on. Jordan, and I'm definitely going to edit his portion of the talk, because Jordan's been as his evaluator for his HP1. I've asked him to write a one-page essay on his journaling experience with one of his players, where the journal is not for the coaches. With Hockey Canada, Sammie, the journal was, the coaches were going to all read them. So it's different than, it's a personal diary that he didn't want to share. But this particular player openly wanted to see if he was interested in it, which allowed the debriefing. So when Jordan discovered the rough notes, and it went to another level of thinking. And I think the conversation we're having about mandated journaling, anything mandated, is really questionable. You have to draw it out of them. And it's just like the video session. You got a mandated NHL video session.
But I think Tim's right that at some point you got to learn. So like at some point it kind of has to be either relatively mandated or relatively guided or something so that they can learn. And then it becomes, it morphs into their own personal journal experience. I'm
just relating Tim's story about the Ottawa Senators coaches doing a video session and not saying a word, and the players generated all the feedback, and they won 3 games in a row since then. The idea of the players actually being engaged through journaling with one another and with themselves is really, really vital. So great stories. And Sammie, I'm glad you shared that, because I know that since I received the journals when we initiated, and they weren't really journals, they were sort of every 3 weeks they had to send in what went on the weekend, what was their feedback, and I read every one and emailed them questions about how did the games go, what did you do well, describe yourself in that experience. So it became a positive communication. Number one, they knew Hockey Canada was listening and caring about them, not evaluating them, just trying to help them grow. But now the journals are shipped in, checked off, and I think shipped out again. And that interaction
Wally, the journals now, just so you know, have morphed into, they are all online. They have 6 different things they have to relay in the evening, and you get checked off on it. If you do not do that for 4 weeks in a row, your carding is affected and they take your money away. So it is now really ominous over their heads. So every Sunday night, I mean, this happens in our household, every Sunday night, you got to make sure everything gets all done and it gets all filled in and gets all, numbers are put in and everything is there. And if it's not, then your carding is affected the next month, and they cut your carding. So that's happening at all levels. And that's tough, because then, I mean, are you as an athlete really getting the full benefit of this amazing potential opportunity?
Tim, Tim, did you have a point? And then Dominic?
Dom was first, I think.
Okay, go ahead, Dom.
Just a question, Sammie Joe. What would you suggest as a starting point then? Obviously the extreme is what you explained with the Canadian national team and this, mandate to, check every box. But if you, in your opinion, what would be the questions you would ask as far as kind of the initiation?
Well, I thank you for asking me, Dom. I think because of track and field, it was just something we had to do. And you had to, describe how you're feeling after every workout. And then you would go back and figure out, when you were at your best and when you peaked and all that kind of stuff. But my suggestion is to ask the guys that are like teachers, that are currently teachers right now, because I feel like it's probably in schools is maybe more the way to kind of teach that. And they probably do more of it. So maybe let's defer to the people that really know how to do these things. Tim, you're on mute.
Thanks. One thing I might add is, there's I think the logbook thing originated way back when with Hockey Canada because of the need to educate the athletes on how to be an elite athlete. I would totally agree in lots of ways that it's a bit of an arduous thing, but it's also, if actually you do it the right way And after every day, you just take 10 minutes and jot down, well, I did this for a workout. This is what I ate. This is how I felt. It can be a really, really useful tool. And, it is, reflecting on how you feel physically and, both before and after workouts or games and everything is a useful thing. And it's something we're trying to introduce to the Danish girls as well. I mean, Peter has instituted a sort of a mandatory login system as well to just encourage them to be active in their pursuit of being an elite athlete, developing themselves physically with their workouts so we can monitor what they're doing. And of course, like you're saying, they can lie. But eventually that lie is going to show itself, because if you're not improving over time, over a year-long, 2-year-long period, if there's no needle movement in some of the physical areas, that's going to become evident. So yes, people can fool themselves in the short term and be deceitful, but it is a good process to go through if you hope to be an elite athlete. It's important to understand what makes you tick, what helps you get ready to perform in a game. That's a whole, not separate area, but different area, like your game routine and all that sort of thing. But, too many people, I believe, too many athletes or potential elite athletes miss the mark because they don't self-reflect and they don't look at how they can be better, and they aren't aware of how they can be at their best or help themselves through the times when maybe they're struggling mentally or they're struggling physically, and help them get through those moments so they can perform better. So there's lots and lots of benefits to self-reflection and journaling. But the basic message for me was it sort of grew both with our Danish team and with the Hockey Canada as a tool to help players learn to be an elite athlete. And that self-reflection and self-understanding is a big, big part of that, I believe, anyway. I'm not sure whether it's Dom or Wally next, or I don't know whether you didn't put your hands down, but.
Dom, what did you think? Did you find out anything from Sammie's feedback? Where do you start?
Yeah, no.
High school?
Yeah, no, for
girl.
sure. Yeah. I mean, I think in regards to getting them, like you said, the self-awareness of being able to understand, okay, well, what did I do? I felt great this game. If I have the notes to be able to go back, well, hey, listen, I know I slept well. I know I had a good breakfast. I know in the days leading up to it, right? Like, I think that piece is important. I know with the minor league team last year, we would have guys evaluate how hard practice was. And I remember having the conversation with the strength coach that we have it on an app, and literally all we asked them to do is just slide how hard the practice was, and you'd be amazed of how many guys didn't do it. Like, and that was the only feedback we were looking for. So, the girls, as we know, are different in the way that, they're just more, well, and again, I'm generalizing, but in my brief experience, they have a more they have more of an interest in their game, and they're, if you tell them to journal, like I feel they will. Now, obviously, I'm generalizing, but just my brief experience coaching the boys and the girls, I think just being able to give them, the guidance to start keeping track of just the basic things as far as sleep and eating. I know, I'm having, issues with certain girls. Their diet and their sleep is horrendous. They're 4.0 students, but they don't sleep and they don't eat. They'll have one meal a day and they'll have gummies and chips for the rest of the day. So it's, and then they wonder why at a certain point they're exasperated and the world's coming to an end. Well, because they're just they're redlining at the limit. So I think it's a great tool to be able to give them, to be able to say, okay, well, what did you eat following up? Well, how was your sleep? And, you say like, I guess the one, like you mentioned, they're going to lie, but I guess they're only cheating themselves, to an extent, because it's not that they don't know that sleep's important or they don't know what food is important, but I think for them to objectively be able to look and to be able to say, oh, geez, I ate, one meal in the last couple of days, right? So.
Okay, Mike, I was thinking of one thing before I turn it over to you. The big thing about journaling and mandating, it's communication and trusting one another. So, Mike, the app that I think you were on, that you've used before, what is it called again? Power what?
Yeah, the power player. But that's actually leading up to my question. But yeah, it's not a two-way communication tool, but
it's a one-way. But it builds they read it, they're engaged in it.
It's my journaling to them, really.
Yes. Okay, that's good. And if you could just comment on that and go ahead with whatever you were going to talk about.
Yeah. So my question for me, and I'm sorry for being late on the call, but I would love to know, like, maybe some of the strategies you guys have used in a journal, because I've never done journaling with the players. I've done like goal setting, and they write down like their weekly goals and their, what their mission statement is. I know my own son does work with a nutritionist, and they have to do journaling each week. Like, okay, how much water did you drink? How much sleep did you get? What day did you feel great? What day did you not feel great? Things like that. Putting your phone down and being honest about it turning off at 10 o'clock at night, and going to bed. So I guess my question would be, what are some of the strategies you guys have used? And Sammie Joe, maybe you as an athlete with the players, like, do you think there's a lot of peer, like, programming in there where you can be like, listen, I'm going to gather my players that I know will buy into this, and then help the other players buy into it by just modeling? Or are you just hoping that players just follow the mandate?
An athlete like me. So I think it highly, different values than, maybe you have, and has a different value set on education as well. So I think that's the biggest kind of hindrance, I think, to people, that if school and that matters, I think they're going to be a buy-in. I mean, if they are a driven student, this is something that's just another piece of it. But if they're not a driven student, how do you still get that feedback from that student or that athlete? I think it might have to be more one-on-one. So if we look back in our national team career to maybe somebody like Sherry Piper, who's incredibly intelligent, but didn't have the buy-in to, say, the logbooks necessarily, but still so aware, so self-aware of what she would go through. If you had a conversation with her, she would be able to give that feedback to you instantly. So maybe there needs to be I don't know, Tim, you might have thoughts on this, but maybe a peer, like within the speaking world, we don't have mentors. We have like a mastermind group. So you're all on equal footing, and maybe, you're holding each other accountable in that way. I don't know. It's you want it to be a great experience for those, even if you are not academically inclined. And I don't want to say academically inclined in that way, because I mean, somebody like Sherry Piper still went to Dartmouth and incredibly intelligent. So different types of ways of manifesting perhaps that intelligence and getting it out of them.
Yeah. I had an experience with a very immediate elite group of players going to China, playing the senior men's league games, 6 teams, and then finally playing the national team. We were responsible for their education. They were away for 3 weeks. My assistant coach was an educator and a counselor. I had expertise in history and sort of language arts subjects, and we were responsible for it. But we set up peer groups, and stronger students were able to lead groups in subject areas, and we mixed them up. And a kid who had not passed his math all year when he got back, had to write an exam and scored 76 because of the peer teaching that went on. So my point was the students trust each other. And I recall Tim taking your ed school team on a trip and them having a study hour in a giant boardroom. And I just watched how they sat and they gathered around the guy who was best at math or the guy who was best at physics. And the benefit of that, them teaching one another, peer teaching, and whether you can peer journal or not, I don't know, but it's just about that meaningful connection and communication that it's an important process and it's worth experimenting with. Sure. Any more thoughts? Anybody else on how to improve self-awareness through journaling, through coaching, through communication? Mike?
Well, I think we all know there's a lot of players out there who are of the school that I just want to play. And it's a really, from my seat, it's a lazy approach. And you can never be the best you can be if you're not going to make an effort in some areas that you're not strong at to get better at. And it's a hard thing. You know, as a coach, I was thinking, how do you have a one-on-one conversation with somebody who's not self-aware? Like, how do you have a conversation about your pregame preparation if you're not self-aware? Like, that's a really hard thing. And I think
Tim, I mean,
sort of comes just comes down to education, really. Try to educate them to the benefits of becoming more self-aware is really the key to it. But that's a long, difficult process. Sorry.
Yeah. So you don't become that player unless you're incredibly self-aware and working on those small details and able. So how does a coach get that from that player? How does that coach ensure that player still has that, is improving their awareness? And I guess that's maybe the conversation I love Wally's idea of the peer teaching. I think that could work within that team because I think that they do have a lot of respect for each other. They've all gone through, most of them, a lot of traumatic things within their team. And I think that could really help just developing that, you have that conversation post-practice, 4 or 5 guys. How did that practice go? What should we have done differently? Maybe how can we change it for tomorrow? Just even maybe something simple like that for people. And there's going to be girls like this too that struggle with reading and writing. And that's just not going to be the way it's just going to be very anxious, riddled for them and difficult. So anyways.
But I mean, but basically I think I'm on the right track. Then what we just started doing is these accountability buddies with the team. Now, again, I'm coaching youth hockey, right? So I'm coaching anywhere between and mentoring coaches that coach 8-year-olds all the way up to 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds. And obviously it's driven by the parents, right? So trying to find, like, if I put out an email to my group and say, hey, we're going to do this accountability buddy program, everybody's going to write down and journal, who's going to answer that the quickest? Like dad, right? He's like, oh yeah, he's in, my son's in 100%. I'm like, yeah, but you're not, that has to come from the athlete, right? There has to be that buy-in, or else like for a guy like me, it just becomes a struggle that I'm always going after the worst kid in the class rather than focusing on the kids that want to learn. Mm-hmm. So I try to be like, listen, I'm giving you the tools. I'm giving you the platform. My kid, our guys use in the nutritional part, they use an app called Slack. It's a business app too, right? Where they could go on, they could talk to each other and talk about recipes and talk about what they ate after their meal, how they felt. So there really does become a lot of interaction with the players to player. But what I'm trying to do is get it more where individual players can, it's a fine line because I don't want to separate the kids. I don't want the accountability buddy kids that are following the journaling and then the kids that don't do it. And then there becomes like, well, if you were doing it, I mean, maybe it helps that the people that don't do it are just as successful, right? At the end of the day, maybe if they're playing just as well and they're tearing it up, maybe they're like, well, listen, I don't need to do the journaling. So
I think it's a rarity though, probably. Yeah.
Right. No, I think so too. I think so. I think to Tim's point, eventually it shows out, right? Eventually it's like, yeah, well, I don't need to do this. I don't need an accountability buddy. But as the players that do it become more self-aware of their surroundings and their teammates and what they're putting in their body and how they're preparing for a game, and that mental and physical warm-ups are so important, maybe that does maybe change the tide. So I think it's a good way to focus, give everybody the opportunity to do it, and then really focus on the kids that are exploring it and then working with them to give them more and more and more. So it's a great point. And I'll definitely institute that. I mean, it's almost like these calls are great for me because it remotivates you to try it again. Yeah.
I thought of Darryl Belfry in this conversation, the idea of peer teaching. Darryl, and we edited this, Mike, and if you go through many of my edits, Darryl did something, 7-8 years ago. He had Matthews and Crosby and who's the star from Toronto, the little guy. They were at one of his camps, and Patrick Kane. And after the camp, they went to a local gathering where there was a television, and Darryl said to Patrick, who's his biggest proponent, I wanted to experiment with looking at a video of what you did and just telling everybody what you were thinking. And Patrick said, I got no problem with it. So away they went. And and what he observed and what he pointed out and the questioning that occurred from the other players, being aware of what Patrick was thinking, the scope of his understanding of the game would exceed anything any coach could imagine. But the players appreciated it. And so they ended up turning into about a 2-3 hour session where they spent time talking about Patrick's clip, and eventually the other players got involved in later evenings, sharing their clips and their thoughts. So it's turned into a tool of learning that's takes you beyond the capacity, similar to Tim's story and Dom's story about running through video and letting the players tell you what they think. It's engaging the mind. And that's the big thing. If they're engaged, they want to do it, they get involved, that's an art. And thanks for bringing that up, Mike, because I think the sooner we can, get to that point where people are excited about learning about themselves and from others, it's going to be a much better game.
And the other thing that struck me, Mike, when you were talking is like you mentioned you're always chasing after the worst offenders to try to get them to buy in. And that's one of the coaching traps, right? You end up spending all your time and energy trying to help the ones that don't even want to help themselves in some ways. So, and it's really hard, but in some ways, like if you can find a way as a coach to give more attention to the ones who are complying, have the discussions with them, give them some feedback. Every player is going to struggle at some point. And that's when maybe you can go back to the worst offenders and like, well, do you have any idea why you're struggling? Maybe you would have benefited from knowing how you were feeling and what you were doing when you were playing great versus now when you're not playing great. So that there will be a coaching opportunity or a learning opportunity or a teachable moment because, we all know you can't go through a season without having some kind of a dip at some point. So there may be a coachable moment, but the basic message, like focus on the people who want to help themselves and want to get better. And maybe some point you can, pull along the others.
I think it was so much different transition for me when I coached at the college level and had players that I recruited. Like I recruited their personality. I recruited that player. That player was in a place where I can control them and their daily routine, right? And I could be with them a lot more. Same thing at the prep school level and most of the high school programs I've coached. I've had that player for a longer term. I think at the youth hockey level, sometimes it's hard, right? Because you don't know that player until 5 months in, and then you cut them, or the organization cuts them, or they move. So I think it's a different way of approaching it, more like a tournament, right? Because you have the shortened period of time where you got to find, okay, what players I'm going to put my effort into, what players I'm just going to manage, and then what players really want to be sponges and take as much in. And I agree with you, focus on those players, and maybe the other kids just come along, or they don't, right? So, but I think it's like for me, that was a huge transition for me, going from the collegiate level where you could really dig in and understand the mindset of a player over the course of their body of work, rather than a kid that comes in without any kind of history with you. So it does become a juggling match to try to find that quicker. And that's why I was so attracted to Wally's program, of doing those, lesson planning and work at the very beginning with the parents and the players to help formulate what we used to take a long time to do in a very short period of time, and figure out who those players are that want to benefit from what you're doing.
Yeah. And I know we all, we wish Morris could be on more often than he has been of late. But I'll be a bit of the languaging Nazi here, and it's a bit of a reprimand, I guess, Mike, but not meant that way. You just use the words an environment where I can control the players. That's not what we're about as coaches. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's not what we're about as coaches. We're trying to help them be better for the benefit of themselves. But languaging.
Yeah, I don't mean to control the player, the control the player's environment. Like know when practices are, when meals are, when training is. That you have certainly not like you are going to do this because I want you to do this. That's not what I meant. But thanks for clarifying the language.
Yeah, no problem. And I got a call, so I get up this. I'll mute myself and slip off here.
Okay. Mike, I just want to interject on the languaging thing by Morris Lukovich. He actually does some brilliant stuff. And when he played major junior and pro, he was thinking about things, not just self-awareness, but awareness of others and what they were doing and why they were doing it. But in his languaging, I've had to deal with him taking it to another level. And you might say the story we tell at coaching clinics is coaches are always telling players what to do, my way or the highway. And the players don't think, and they try to do what they want to please you. And we want them to go from yelling to telling to asking. And now the typical story about the negative languaging is, don't give the puck away. Or what the hell are you doing? It's just a negative thing. So the story at coaching clinics is ninth inning, 2 on base, 2 out, literally a full count with the batter, and it's a tie score. And the manager goes out and tells the pitcher, whatever you do, don't throw it high and inside. And obviously what happens, that's what happens. They will do what you say last. Whether it's prefaced with don't or not, doesn't matter. They will do that. So tell them what to do. Where are you going to put the ball? Where are you going to throw the ball on this guy? Versus that. So the art of coaching and communication there, taking it to a questioning state at that moment, that's about, to me, that's the beauty of this kind of a conversation is Tim could bring up the point about the languaging and coaches being able to ask questions, leading kids to provide the answers you want to get, which means the answers that the will discover themselves. So the Socrates method of coaching and teaching, and whether it's leadership or sports, raising kids. I don't know, Sammie, whether you ask questions or just tell them. How old are your children now, and how would you relate it to child rearing? Sammie.
Well, I think we certainly I try to use the Socrates method, and as much as I can. And I think that with a only child, we have time to do that. We're very fortunate. So we also get to bring her with us to a lot of different things. And so she's, around more adults at times than I think most. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's such a key for teaching. And that's something that, thanks to you, Wally, I've really tried to teach that way in my hockey schools and in really everything I do. So I've actually even changed my presentation to groups. So when I speak to Jordan's team next week, it is getting a lot more feedback from the individuals. And I do that corporately as well, trying to really not make it about me, but make it about them. And, that's hard sometimes from the platform when they're paying you a lot of money to be a speaker and to motivate and inspire. But really, we all have it within ourselves. So getting it out of them in a way that it relates to their lives and it relates to their experience will be way more powerful than me simply saying, oh, we won this gold medal and we did this. So it really, I think I've always had that sort of manner of thinking, but really emphasizing the language around it has been a huge learning process for me. And I'm glad that I learned it when our daughter was really young, so that hopefully we can continue to inspire in that way. But that doesn't mean that sometimes I don't just tell my husband to make the bed or take the garbage out, because I still do that.
Yeah, there's a point. Dom, what are you thinking about? In your environment, you've got daughters playing hockey in your program, you've raised them, and you're coaching guys and girls at a high school. How does this conversation fit in?
Yeah, I mean, obviously pretty relevant just with the buy-in, whether it's practice or whether it's doing the workout or, anything along those lines. I just trying to think of the best way to be able to, you talk about being able to have the more awareness within the teams. And as I say, I'm just reflecting and hearing everybody's opinions and everything else. It's not an easy thing to do. You'll always have your keen kids at the front of the line, and the ones that will do anything that you say. And I agree with Tim that you coach to them and spend your time with the ones that are motivated. It's the question is, I'm sure you guys all deal with it, is how do you get the general buy-in and the overall buy-in from the ones that maybe don't necessarily feel that it's in their best interest to do those things. So just taking a lot in, Wally, not too much in the way of anything to really add, to be honest.
Well, Tom, I don't know if you're listening or editing video over there, but any thoughts on this? What a mosaic of conversation. Tom?
Yeah, I find it very interesting, especially like when I taught, I would have every fourth day, I called it an open day. And the kids would just come in, and I couldn't do this my first year in at school because it took a while to do. And I called it an open day, and the kids would come in and they would just put on the board what they're going to do, and they get into groups and what part of the gym or outside they're going to use. And they would do that. I'll just give an aside. I had this principal came into our school and just for a year, and he was a real rigid guy, and he came and watched and he said, "That is the worst class I've ever seen in my life." He says, "You don't do anything." And I said, "Well, John," and he taught a grade 8 math. I said, what if you had, I said, "This is the best class you ever saw." So he really didn't like that. He says, "What if in your math class, you just wrote on the board, okay, work on what you need to work on." And the kids all walked in, got in groups. They got the books they needed. They sat in groups and helped each other, and nobody was off task. And, at the end of the class, she said, "Okay, put everything away," and they left. I said, "Have you ever had a class like that?" And of course, he grew to dislike me more, but that was the whole point is, that's what we did. And I can see it's a little more difficult to do it with the hockey, but like last night we had a Christmas game and I let the players just do it. They organized the whole thing, and we only have 15 skaters. One player's in the hospital, so. And then one of my assistant coaches, Mike, he played with them, and and they did the whole thing on their own, and they played music and all this sort of thing, and and then my challenge as a coach is, like tonight we have a practice and a lot of players, but we won't have any goalies, and there'll only be about 10 skaters because we're in the middle of exam week. So my challenge as a coach is I've got Mike Schumi, who coached McCarr and Sanderson and all these kids all through midget and bantam, and Terry Johnson, who's probably the best defenseman coach I've ever worked with, played a long time in the NHL, is I don't want them to just come and move pucks at my practice because they'll totally lose interest because they're both terrific coaches. So what I've done in this little last while, we've reduced practices to an hour during exams, and I basically say, okay, we'll do 20 minutes each, and I kind of give the theme of what I'd like to see happen, and I let them do it. So this is kind of on a coach's level, not the player level. So, I can really see the potential for having that, the players meet and do more things together, because I've got like 15 rookies on this team, and it's, and they're pretty good, and we should be way better than we are, but they're all playing nervous like rookies right now, and giving the puck away where they don't have to give the puck away because they got better skills than that. So yeah, I find this very interesting, and I've been but putting video together, and Dom is in a lot of them because they're from the 2 years, 2019 U17 camp and the prospects camp at Winsport. So just little sections of skills, but anyways, those are my thoughts.
You got to look at me. Sorry, you got to deal with me there, Tom.
You're doing a lot of things like that, the pull in and shoot, around an obstacle, and push out and shoot, and different like real refined skills, and battling on the boards and things like that.
The story you said about running your class that way was really precious, Tom, because Jordan did his HP evaluation, and after the practice, he goes in to speak to the girls, and they have a game I'm going to evaluate Saturday, and after the game, they have another ice time kind of thing before Christmas. That first practice after that game, he says it's a captain's practice. So they're going to be planning the practice, and he wants them to get together and submit before the practice, which is on Tuesday, the plan that they come together, they come up with. And the captains are going to run the ice time. So it's pretty good. Your leadership group is getting an opportunity to do it.